Today we will talk about the foot in the door technique. Getting someone to do what you want them to do is an age-old problem we all face from time to time. Whether you're trying to convince someone to buy your product, donate to your charity, or hire you for a job, there are countless areas in our lives in which a little persuasion can go a long way. I ask myself every day how I'm going to get my kids to do their homework or pick their dirty clothes up off the floor. When you're trying to get someone to do something, it can be helpful to have a bit of a technique. One of the most popular techniques is the foot in the door technique. In a nutshell, this technique involves starting with a small request before you make a larger request, and it's actually quite effective according to research. Let's take a look at how this technique works, including the psychology behind it, some real-life examples, and practical tips for making it work. What is the foot in the door technique? In the world of psychology, the foot in the door technique is considered to be a technique that increases compliance. The foot in the door approach seeks to have one first comply with a trivial request with the intention of achieving a more significant one at a later point, explains Michelle Dees, MD, board-certified psychiatrist at Luxury Psychiatry Medical Spa. The term originated in 1966 with psychologists Jonathan Friedman and Scott Fraser, who ran an experiment on American housewives. Their goal was to get the women to allow a team of investigators to visit their homes and take inventory of which products they used most frequently for cooking and cleaning. The researchers found that the women who were given a brief survey to fill out a few days before the initial visit request were much more likely to allow the investigators into their homes. Friedman and Fraser said that their experiment proved that when you prepare people with a smaller request before a bigger one, they are more likely to say yes to the bigger one. The psychologists named this the foot in the door, FITD technique. How and why it works. How does the foot in the door technique work from a psychological POV? According to research, there are two main theories behind the foot in the door effect. Self-perception theory, which is the idea that the preliminary request in the foot in the door technique makes people feel like they are being helpful and caring toward others, increasing the likelihood that they'd want to comply with the second request. Commitment theory, which is the notion that when you accept an initial request, you feel committed to follow through with the second request. According to Christy Tse, LMHC, founder and therapist at Uncover Mental Health Counseling, the foot in the door theory can be explained by the idea of consistency in psychology, which is when people feel driven to maintain a consistent self-image. In practice, when someone consents to a small action, they often feel a psychological obligation to follow through on related, larger actions, Tse says. In my experience as a psychotherapist, understanding this principle can aid in building rapport and fostering cooperation in therapeutic settings. Research and studies. There is a ton of evidence that the foot in the door technique is effective. As summarized in a research article published in Social Influence, there have been 5 meta-analyses of the foot in the door technique, all of which have shown it to be an effective way to get people to comply with your requests. Additionally, studies have looked at specific examples of compliance, including that the foot in the door has helped persuade women to get screened for breast cancer. The technique was also shown to be a successful way to get students to carry cards designating them as organ donors. A 2016 study published in Transportation Research Part F, Traffic Psychology and Behavior, found that the foot in the door technique can be useful when it comes to decreasing driver aggression. The study looked at what would happen when someone stuck in traffic was approached by someone asking for directions and then was thanked after giving the directions. Researchers found that the drivers who had a pleasant interaction during the traffic situation were less likely to honk at other drivers as traffic got worse. Examples of the foot in the door technique. The foot in the door technique can be used in the public sphere as well as in interpersonal interactions. Let's look at some of the scenarios where this technique is utilized. Some of them are likely already quite familiar to you. Not only can it be a useful technique to use, but knowing when it is being used on you can help you avoid being persuaded to do something you don't actually want to do. Commercial and marketing uses. All of us have some first-hand experience with the foot in the door technique via the world of marketing and sales. In marketing, the foot in the door technique is often applied by initially engaging customers with small, enticing offers such as a free sample, Tse describes. Once this initial, low-risk interaction is accepted, marketers can increase the likelihood of customers committing to larger purchases. Social and political campaigns. Social and political campaigns often use principles from the foot in the door technique. For instance, says Say, candidates might first ask voters to display a small token of support, such as a bumper sticker. Following the initial investment, supporters become more inclined to participate in larger types of involvement like donating or volunteering. I've observed firsthand how these small commitments can blossom into significant actions. Highlighting the power of gradual escalation in human behavior, Say describes charitable donations. The foot in the door technique is often used to solicit charitable donations. For instance, research has found that when it comes to donating to charity or donating blood to a blood bank, the foot in the door technique increases chances of success. Interpersonal interactions. There are several different kinds of scenarios where you might use the foot in the door technique in your interactions with others. For instance, Dr. Dees gives the example of wanting to ask a friend for help or support. You might first start with asking if they would lend you a book or another more trivial ask. Then, you might transition to asking them for help with something bigger, like help with a project you are working on or emotional support. This gradual method of escalation can work to strengthen the relationship because the other person's trust and rapport in you grows with every small task, says Dr. Dees. Gradually, the individual may be willing to make larger commitments, thereby increasing the level of interdependence in the relationship. In a therapy setting, Say says that the foot in the door technique can be helpful for therapists to use. I often utilize the foot in the door technique to facilitate deeper conversations, she says. For example, when meeting a new client who seems hesitant, Say often starts by asking them to share a minor detail about their day, a simple, non-intrusive request. A particular instance that stands out to me is when a client who was initially resistant to therapy opened up after agreeing to discuss a simple mood check-in at the beginning of sessions. Say shares, this method of easing gradually into vulnerability can be very effective in creating a safe, supportive environment for personal growth. Foot in the door versus other techniques. There are several different compliance techniques described by therapists in addition to the foot in the door technique. Probably the most famous one is the door in the face technique. This technique is basically the opposite of the foot in the door technique. In the door in the face technique, you start with a bigger, sometimes extreme, initial request and then follow with a smaller, more doable request. The foot in the door technique is a gentler and more gradual approach, Dr. Dees points out. The two techniques draw from different psychological phenomena, she says, with the foot in the door playing on guilt and concession, and the door in the face technique centering on consistency and commitment, criticisms and limitations. With approaches like the foot in the door technique, moral considerations may come up. Ethical considerations arise when this technique manipulates or pressures individuals beyond their comfort zones, Say notes. Although the foot in the door technique is a helpful way to facilitate gradual, meaningful progress to a goal without overwhelming someone, you have to be careful not to use it as a way to manipulate. It's essential to use this technique judiciously to avoid any sense of coercion or obligation, Say emphasizes. This is true in both interpersonal and public uses of the technique. It becomes an oppressive technique if used poorly as it compels people to agree to even more foolish requests, says Dr. Dees. Any person or entity using this technique must be vigilant that it's used with integrity. Making sure that people are free to say no without fear of consequences is not only ethical but builds trust too, Dr. Dees explains. Practical tips for using foot in the door technique. So, meaning that your first request should be in some way related to the second one. Consistency in your requests makes the other person begin to appreciate the connection between the steps. She explains. This way helps to remind us why this goal is set and why there is a need to move toward its attainment. Build trust. When you are using the foot in the door technique in relationships, you want to focus on respect and trust. You should make it clear that the other person understands your motives for requesting what you are asking for. With such trust, people are more willing to cooperate with you and positive results are a good expectation. Dr. Dees says, be responsible. When it comes to the foot in the door techniques, it's all about understanding people's limits. Always keep the other person's boundaries in perspective, Dr. Dees advises. Ethics are important here, she explains. You don't want to manipulate the other person in the scenario, and you want to be able to let the request go if they are uncomfortable with it. Takeaways. The foot in the door technique can be an effective way to build trust and facilitate engagement, Say says. It works in the area of marketing, political campaigns, and securing donations for charity and other causes. It's also a great way to ask people for favors, make them more comfortable with sharing their feelings, and simply to get someone who is reluctant to cooperate with a request. But it should be done thoughtfully and with care. The key is to ensure that each step feels comfortable and achievable. Avoiding any sense of pressure, Say concludes. Goodbye and see you in the next video.